Alright students, we are going to begin our acrylic painting unit in Intro to Art. We will be looking at a couple of artists, one of them being an op artist, Victor Vasserly, and creating some interesting designs that way. We'll also be looking at Robert Indiana. And so when you are putting that together, you're going to get one of these handouts, start to plan out your ideas. Robert Indiana and Victor Vasserly, all of them use a lot of bold colors, so be thinking of the color choices, thinking about some designs and things like that. I do want you to be original in your ideas and not just putting in your favorite logo. I want you to use symbols, things that are important, your favorite number, your favorite colors, maybe a word that's interesting to you, that maybe reflect your identity. And so be thinking about that, forming your ideas. Do a couple of sketches in your sketchbook or on a piece of paper to come up with a general overall plan. It doesn't take very long, and it does help you to kind of establish your ideas. It's easy to just kind of draw out and redo on a piece of paper versus on our materials. Now, I do have this canvas paper, and this canvas paper is of limited supply, so I really don't want you starting over a dozen times. I do want you to plan out your project and begin and end with the same piece of canvas. If for some reason you will need another one, we can make that arrangement. But of course, if you plan out well, you shouldn't have any troubles. Now, I am going to have this in a tablet, and oftentimes we'll put a mark on the front side of the canvas. There is two sides to this canvas. There's a rough side and a smooth side. The smooth side has a coating of gesso on it. It's a primer, and it does make the canvas a little bit easier to paint on. So be thinking about that. If it is difficult for you to paint on it, it's probably because you are painting on the incorrect side. So when in doubt, ask me, and we'll determine which side is the best side that you're working on. Now, when you do draw out your design, I do want you to draw lightly with pencil. If you are using any kind of light colors, sometimes pencil is hard to cover up. So be thinking about that. Come up with your design, draw it out. Use a ruler. You can use stencils and things like that to kind of draw out your shapes. A cool shape design with the cool colors that you choose are going to be ideal. Also, when you are deciding to use paint, we're going to have these paint trays here. You really, a lot of times, just need a small amount of paint each time you go to paint. You don't have to fill this whole thing with every color of the rainbow. In each class period, you'll have a limited amount of time to work, and so get what paint you need so that it's not wasted. It does, after a while, even with the lid on, dry out a bit. Now, if you do find that you have a color that you are mixing and creating and you want to use it each time and you want to be able to match, sometimes it is difficult to rematch a color that you've mixed up. Make sure you make enough for the job at hand. And then I have some of these containers that you can put a lid on and preserve that paint throughout the project. Then if at some point you feel like you are done with this, you can put the paint you've mixed, if you've got some left over with the other paints. Somebody else could use this piece. Now also be considering when you do mix up some paints, whenever you mix a paint together and you've got a light color and a dark color, start with the light color and slowly darken it with the dark color. It takes a lot of paint to lighten a color, but not as much when you're looking just to add a little bit of dark, a little bit more dark, a little bit more dark to get it darker. It takes a lot of white sometimes to lighten a dark color. So keep that in mind when you're creating your painting. Now, also be considering, this may seem like an obvious situation, but I do see it oftentimes. When you're painting a big area, use a big brush. When you're painting a small area, use a small brush. The square-ended brushes do kind of work nice on edges, and sometimes I do see kids spending an awful lot of time trying to fill in an area with a really tiny brush. Use the size of brush for the job. Now also, when you're painting on, if it doesn't coat the first time, just give it consecutive coats. It does look nice when you've added some layers of paint. If you do get in a rush and you just glob it on there, leaving big brush strokes, big areas, or even mounded up paint, that will dry like that and be permanent. Okay, a few more things to consider are you can use masking tape to tape off and create some nice even edges. If you find that you have an edge that didn't come out perfectly clean, you definitely can go back through and clean it up with the paintbrush. Once this is dry, I can add tape to the other side and paint the other sections. Now, I would suggest, though, when you are painting little areas, you don't really want to have to paint over this with another color. Paint the blue, the color blue, the white, the color white, yellow, and that kind of thing. If you've got a black area and you want to go over it with a lighter color, it doesn't always succeed that well. It's difficult to cover up a dark color with a light color. Now, if you did make a mistake and you're doing something specific like maybe an op art and you've got black and white, black and white, black and white, and you need to cover up something, maybe you messed it up a little bit, I do have a thing called gesso that we can go over. It's a primer coat, and that will kind of cover up a lot of dark colors. May take a couple coats, but we can kind of fix those little errors as those situations come up. Now, once you're all finished, it is important that each and every one of us clean up after ourselves, clean out these trays. I do have a student that spends a lot of time cleaning those up to make them look nice. Clean out the containers, as well as it's really important that you clean up your brushes. If you leave paint on here, it is going to harden and be very difficult to get out. I have to usually soak them overnight in order for it to loosen up that acrylic paint. Pretty much that hardens up like plastic. So when you go over to the sink, put a little soap in your hands, clean up the brushes, get them all thoroughly cleaned, all that paint out of there, and then put them in there with the hair in the air, and put them in the nice small, medium, large container. Alright, so that concludes our important tips on acrylic painting. Have a great time at it.